Future of Music, Part 3. I believe that Zen harmony, or microtonality, or music that experiments with tuning beyond 12-tone equal temperament, will become popular in the future. There are vast and diverse approaches to musical tuning, and all allow different results and thus emotional responses. I believe that previously existing barriers that prevented widespread, free, and in-depth exploration of this area are no longer relevant as they used to be, thus fostering interest in an area traditionally relegated to niche interest. Some of these barriers include high resource allocation for instrument creation, the necessity of multiple humans and expensive instruments collaborating for larger musical projects, and more severe bottlenecks from which music proliferation and music careers had to compromise with to achieve success. Historically, experimenting with tuning was more costly, as new tunings would have required new acoustic instruments with different key layouts. Pursuing these alternative tunings would have made collaboration more difficult, as different instruments with different tunings playing simultaneously can create cacophonous harmony. And finally, all this experimental music would have been uncongenial to music producers, music publishers. Nowadays, experimenting with tuning only requires, at minimum, software that permits it. Without expense, you can quickly map different tunings onto regular keyboards or isomorphic keyboards without having to manufacture new hardware. Not only does this make collaboration easier, but the nature of modern music production also allows individuals to create grand projects of sound independently. And finally, the existence of the internet, streaming services, video sharing platforms, and social media allow for the distribution of diverse music. Much to the chagrin of most viewers, I believe AI will become extremely influential in the future of music creation. I believe that this push will primarily be led by new and amateur musicians as opposed to pre-established ones, and that younger audiences will accept it, whilst established audiences will be thoroughly repulsed by it. Many people call AI music slop and soulless. First, I will address the slop allegations and then the soulless allegations. People say prompting music takes no talent, and thus AI music creation software fosters the mass production of low quality output. This is where the slop allegations come from. But can't the prompting of music be compared to sampling music? In both instances, a composer is taking pre-created music, then collaging it, altering it, or adding to it, either to a significant or insignificant extent, then passing the final product off as largely their own. And what about the people who don't synthesize their own sounds, but rather use presets created by the synthesizer developers? What about people who don't create their own percussion, but rather use drum loops? And although this next example will be slightly out of category, what about the people who lean on autotune or melodyne to bypass the necessity of raw vocal skill? Relative to its allowance of the bypassing of previously required skill, the use of AI music creation software as a co-creator is not fundamentally different from any of the other examples I have provided. You can't approve of sample music whilst calling AI music slop. One response to all of this is that in all those examples I gave, the pre-existing musical fragment was created by a human under complete intentionality, whereas the AI music wasn't. Sure, the AI software is created by a human, and a human is doing the prompting, but there is still a larger gap between a human's action and the resulting musical creation. The gap is created by the uncertainty inherent in the AI instrument. When a human prompts something, even with high nuance and sophistication, he cannot predict exactly what will come out, and thus cannot claim the musical produce as wholly intentional. This means a machine devoid of humanity is collaborating with a human to create a product that is often intimately tethered to what it means to be uniquely human. It is this phenomenon that generates the soulless accusations, even if the accusers cannot verbalize it themselves. However, there actually is precedent for this. In certain avant-garde classical music from the early to mid-20th century, some composers would experiment with the compositional process, resulting in varying degrees of unpredictability during their performances. Examples of this include some types of algorithmic music. There may be broad intentionality over the outline of the piece, but no intentionality over the precise unfolding of the piece, thus stripping the composer of accurately describing what note would fall on beat 1 of bar 29. A similar process was also occurring in early electronic music. When Louis and Bibi Baron were creating the famous Forbidden Planet soundtrack, the machinery they were using was unwieldy and took up an entire studio's worth of space. Everything was constantly recorded because, at times, they weren't certain of exactly when they would produce something of substance. They would then retroactively pass through the recordings and collage everything together. I can personally vouch for this reality because I have used a digital instrument called Burner, created by Giorgio Sancristoforo, which replicates this 1950s electronic music machinery. I will leave a link to Sancristoforo's website and socials where you can further investigate his work. The connection I am drawing here between AI-assisted music and these historical examples is that in all instances, the compositional process unfolds in a manner that removes total certainty from the human creator over what music will be created through his actions. This means the human formulated process or created machine, or human created machine, is doing some of the creating, and the human is using taste to compose after the fact or alter the compositional process to refine the performance. If AI music is soulless because there isn't total human intentionality throughout the creation process, does that mean that classical avant-garde music and the Forbidden Planet soundtrack, both of which are taken seriously by the musical establishment, are equally soulless? I think not. I believe that artificialness will not just be incorporated into the compositional process but also into the performer-entertainer. I predict this will occur through avatar chatbot musicians. This dynamic will unfold as follows. First, a studio will come up with ideas for a musical project. These ideas will include the genre of the music as well as the personality of the pop star. The studio will then enlist producers to create the music, and they will program the avatar. The avatar will have a name, a voice, a specific base appearance, and most importantly, a specific personality and style. The avatar will be animated to perform music videos and will be hologrammed in for live performances. The avatar will also have its own customized chatbot. Fans of the avatar artist will be able to communicate with it at any moment and to any extent. Studios will like this type of musical project. They will have much more control over the product, as the tightly micromanaged avatar will not be as unruly or uncooperative as a human pop star. During the promotion of Snow White, actress Rachel Zegler was tenacious in voicing her political beliefs. In her interviews and social media output, she was vocal about her support for feminism and Palestine. Regardless of your personal thoughts on whether she was right or wrong, this brought significant media controversy to a film that was already plagued by it. Undoubtedly, the producers and studio heads would have loved Ziegler to act differently, yet they couldn't make her do that because she is a human. Studio heads and producers will not have this issue with an avatar. If the avatar does veer into politics, it will only be what the studio heads want, and thus will only be inoffensive to the target audience. Human pop stars also want privacy and don't want to constantly have to deal with fans. They don't want to constantly take photos, sign autographs, or even have conversations in the street. An avatar through its chatbot will not experience this issue. In this video so far, I have discussed my predictions for the future of music. However, my final prediction about the future of music requires moving far beyond the conventional boundaries defining this medium. I believe art is strongly intertwined with aesthetics and emotion, which in turn are also intertwined with our five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. An artistic medium is created when a characteristic format is required to engage one or more of our senses. Music is just one medium of artistic expression, with others including literature or visual art. A multimedia art project is one that intertwines different artistic media into a single cohesive product, such as cinema or music videos, which both target sight and hearing. When the average person thinks about art, they think about different media that only target two senses, sight and hearing. But what if new artistic media could be created, or previous ones expanded, to create to engage the remaining three senses: smell, taste, and touch? When I think about this subject, my mind often invokes the plot points from the book A Brave New World. In this prescient story, there is a futuristic version of cinema called the Feelies. In it, the smells and physical sensations that normally would only be implied by sight and hearing were directly transmitted to the audience members via technology in the seats. Another work of fiction my mind goes to is Against Nature by the French author J.K. Huysmans. The book follows a bohemian aesthete who desires to transcend into a world consumed by art and the aesthetics. His pursuits don't just involve literature and visual art, but also perfumes and foods. We should also acknowledge an interesting debate about whether certain approaches to cooking can constitute as artistic. If a chef is attempting to create food that emphasizes aesthetics, the eater's emotional response, intentional stimulation of the senses, and even tell a story, could the dish not be considered art rather than mere sustenance? If we look at the foundational definition of art and how intimately it is tied with broader indulgence of the aesthetic, would it not be logical to assume that in the future, artistic media will evolve to encompass all the five human senses?